The chair is now pleased to recognize the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Curtis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to be here, and this is an important hearing. I think you're going to hear in my questions a theme that we've heard throughout the day. I'd like to start with Dr. Cavazzoni. My colleagues and constituents back home often communicate to me that the FDA needs to be less risk adverse, and they cite the inability to access investigatorial treatments under expanded access and a right to try as one reason why. Now, I have here in my notes, without undermining patient safety, but I'm going to put a big asterisk by that because our patients are not exactly worried about their safety, right? They're worried about living. And so with that in mind, is there more that Congress can do to make the FDA and pharmaceutical community more comfortable offering these drugs to patients under expanded access and right to try? It feels to me like there's some hesitancy because the patients might not always be in the best health. They may not be the best clinical pick, but they're denied a potential for something life-saving because of this risk-adverse nature. So my question to you is, what can Congress do to add to the comfort level of both the FDA and the pharmaceutical companies so they're more willing to take more risk? Dr. Cavazzoni, that's to you.
My apology, Congressman.
Okay.
I did not unmute myself.
I understand.
When it comes to clinical trials, we work with sponsors to design clinical trials that have the best chance of
So I'm gonna cut you off, Doctor, and I don't mean to do that, but you know we have limited time. That's really not my question. My question is, these people are desperate for an opportunity to try something, and there is an aversion to risk on both of, and understand that aversion, right? I mean, that's natural. I mean, their reputations are at stake. The reputation of the FDA is at stake. How do we protect, as Congress, how do we protect them so they're more willing to take risk?
What I would like to make the point that, in fact, every day when we work with sponsors and with clinical trials for drugs for ALS, we take into consideration the fact that there is a much higher tolerance for risk in people who are afflicted by this disease. And we take that into consideration as we review the data. So, for instance, we do have a higher threshold when it comes to safety. We also are open and have, in many instances, accepted less safety information that we would normally
So
accept
once
for
again,
diseases.
and I just have so much I want to ask you. That's please excuse me for interrupting you. I really would like you to go back and consider that question because I just know that your nature, the nature of doctors, is to not take risk, and I think we need a different paradigm here as we look at this. Let me ask you again, and perhaps any of the witnesses that would like to answer this. I've noticed and been touched by, almost without exception, all my colleagues who've asked questions today know somebody back home, a family member, a neighbor that's afflicted either by ALS or Down syndrome or MS. Of course, I'm no different. ALS has ravaged my neighborhood, and I currently have a very, very good friend suffering from ALS. He's been fortunate because of some of his resources. He's been able to travel worldwide to receive some of these treatments. So many are not. He frequently discusses how patients are unable to receive many treatments under right to try that are under clinical investigation, for which he can, if he's willing to travel and spend more than the average person is able to do, access. I get it. The complexity of treating certain diseases can be a challenge, especially to ensure sufficient trials participation. Additionally, it's hard to predict how individuals may react to an experimental drug. Is there more we should consider doing to get patients into clinical trials without undermining the integrity of the trials and harming patients? And I'm referring specifically to Congress, right? I know that you're doing your job. What can we do to expedite this?
I think that having a greater push when it comes to understanding the biology of disease will be very important in advancing the therapies for ALS. Continuing to support us as we continue to focus on expanding the eligibility criteria for clinical trials will be very important because we want to have as many patients as possible being able to access clinical trials, and also continuing to support us in our efforts to engage with sponsors to make drugs through expanded access more available to patients.
Doctor, I'm going
be very important.
to lose my time. I want to make one point, and that is something that you brought up, which is the cause. We spent a lot of time, and we've talked a lot of time today about treatment, but I'm not convinced that we exactly know the cause, if it's environmental, if it's not environmental, and I'd just like to emphasize how important that your work is in that area. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield my time.